Louis Riddick, NFL, ESPN, one of the greats. He was on our show last year. We had an amazing time. Last year, we were reacting to Nick Saban and Bill Belichick being out of jobs in the same day. So there's a little less news today, but certainly some stuff to talk about. Weekend of games is interesting. This weekend's going to be amazing. But I want to start here. The Cowboys are looking for a head coach. And I think there's a million ways you can, make this boring debate. Oh, who should they go with? Why do they wait with Mike McCarthy or whatever? But for me, nothing's going to change unless the Cowboys decide to change things, right? Yeah. And if they hire somebody, they're probably getting the same results as Mike McCarthy. Good team, not a great team, because they have talent, but they can't maximize the roster. They don't have a culture. They don't maximize all the little edges required to win an NFL playoff game, frankly. Yep. So I'm just going to put this to you. Jerry Jones calls you and says, help me change the Cowboys culture, Louis Riddick. What do you tell Jerry Jones?
Well, I think first and foremost, you tell him you're going to have to take a back seat. You're going to have to step out of the limelight. You cannot be a guy who ultimately, whether it be players, whether it be coaches, whether it be administrators, whether it be support staff, can always come to kind of circumvent what is the chain of command, or what you would think would be a nice, traditional, clean, linear chain of command. How they could circumvent that and kind of throw things off the rails. So that's the first thing that he would have to do and have to be willing to do. And I think that's when the conversation kind of then morphs into what kind of head coach does he need? Does he need someone like Deion? Could he handle someone like Deion Sanders? Could he handle someone like Bill Belichick? Could he handle a strong general manager? As long as he is where he is at in the hierarchy, and look, he's always going to be at the top of the hierarchy because he's the owner. But as long as he is kind of like involved in the day-to-day decision-making process, and the final authority ultimately rests with him, not from a big picture perspective, but from like a daily perspective, the culture is never going to change, because ultimately people know that they can probably leverage their individual relationships with you in order to get things that they want that maybe aren't in the best interest of the team. And I don't know if he's ever going to be willing to do that, because he has pretty much said in recent days, as a matter of fact, and I'm paraphrasing, look, I bought this team so I can run the damn thing. I bought this team so I can be involved. I bought this team so I can make the decisions, not because I can then turn it over and let someone else make the decisions and do all the fun stuff. There's a reason why I bought the thing. I bought the job that I have. And when you think of it that way, you're sitting there and you're going, wow, I've never heard an owner say that before, quite honestly. I've never have. And he never said, I'm qualified for it. I'm the best man for it. I have proven that I'm the best man. What he said was, I bought it, so it's mine. So I think when you think about it in that way, this is always one of those conversations where you feel like you're like yelling out into this vast, black hole where the sound will just travel forever and no one's ever going to hear it. Because as long as that mentality exists with him, I don't know if culture is something you'll ever be able to get your arms around. And Kev, how hard it is to really kind of get your arms around that entire concept anyway. What is culture? How do you build culture? How do you maintain it? In that kind of situation, it's almost impossible unless he were to step back. And see, then from there, you really do need to have a singular voice. Yeah. You need to have someone who is, like I said earlier today on TV, who is the tip of the spear. You have to understand who exactly that person is. And if you want someone like Deion, if you want someone like Bill, I don't care what they say privately or what they say to maybe some of their media contacts when they say, hey, I'm willing to step back. Yeah. I'm willing to share. No, they're not, because that's not who they are, and that's not who you want them to be. And I think as long as you trust what their vision is, what their philosophical underpinnings are, what their communication style is, what their ability to gain trust, to display competency, to positively impact people, then you let them do it. You let them go at it. Because then all it does is it just kind of trickles down. It trickles down. You let them put their plan in place. You let them be a consistent voice of reinforcement day after day after day. Lots of consistency. Consistency then breeds trust. As long as they're, that they're competent and that they're impacting players, more and more players buy in, more and more players when it comes. That doesn't it sound exactly like? It sounds exactly like what Bill Belichick has done throughout the course of his career. What Deion has done in Colorado, since he is the name right now, in the headlines, and that's what I would tell him. And he knows that. I mean, Jimmy Johnson did this for him. He did that for him in the 90s.
Yep.
But what happened was very similar to what happened when I was in Washington. When I was in Washington in 2001,
Yeah.
coming off the 2001 season, I believe we were 8-8. We had won like 5 of our last 6. We had a ton of cap space going into 2002. But guess what? The owner wasn't having fun.
Yeah.
He wasn't involved. Marty Schottenheimer was running everything. And see, that's the thing that throws everything off the rails in situations like this. And that's what keeps, to me, throwing things off the rails. They get close, but then when you're trying to find that inch, Kev, when you're trying to find that extra inch to kind of like kick you over the top, a lot of times that involves less of you. Yeah. When you're talking about a guy like Jerry Jones, and he's not willing to do that at this point.
Completely agree. I know this is a big question, but off of that, you've been around a bunch of NFL teams. You've been in facilities, front offices. Mm-hmm. What makes a good owner? Because we've seen this. Someone asked me yesterday, Kay Adams asked me yesterday, what the culture in Washington is. And I said, Josh Harris had the best job in the world last year, which is being not Dan Snyder. Greatest job in the history of the world, but that only buys you 1 year. Then you got to produce. Otherwise, people say, oh, you're just like the last guy. And then he's done it. He hired Adam Peters. He's letting him work, all that stuff. So, you see Jeffrey Lurie, obviously, every single year deliver a good product to the fans. You just see it. I mean, and the older I go in this game, not like I'm playing or anything, but I'm just around it every single year, the more I realize it's just 80%, 90% ownership. And sometimes a superstar, supernova player like Patrick Mahomes changes things. But part of that is that that player changes the ownership. Like, Clark Hunt has changed and gotten more aggressive and stuff like that because they had a player. So I'll leave the floor open to you. What makes a good owner?
Being able to look, I think owners have to be very much so adept at identifying great leadership.
Yeah.
It has the 3 pillars like I just talked about when you're talking about head coaches, right?
Yeah.
They have to be able to identify people who, when it comes to the game of football, because trying to look, their leadership kind of is all encompassing. There's a lot of very similar traits that transfer from football to basketball to IBM to Dell to Hewlett Packard, whatever. But they have to be great at identifying through the interview process guys who are credible and trustworthy, who have great resumes, come with great references, guys who obviously have displayed a high level of competency in the field that you're looking for. So in case, whether it be the head coach or the general manager, and a lot of times that involves, as an owner, being willing to admit what you don't know, and having people help you get pointed in the right direction, and then have those people some of it's going to be about what they have already put on display in their past, and some of it's going to be about projection. When I'm talking about, can they positively impact my organization? Can they impact me as an owner? Can they impact the player support staff? Can they impact the business side of our organization? Can they impact other coaches? Can they impact the trainers, the weight room, the equipment staff? Can they positively make all of those people want to raise their game another level? And so once you get those people in place, right, Kev? So you're talking about the GM and the head coach. What makes a great owner? Support, positive reinforcement, giving people the resources, and being able to adapt and adjust, especially when sometimes their philosophical beliefs or their philosophical things that they want to implement may change, and they may have to pivot, and not always, not constantly second guessing them, but putting your trust in them and making them feel like they're, that they're believed and that they're trusted and that they're supported, and that you aren't going off to the side and talking to other reporters about, hey, you know what, maybe I made a mistake with this guy. Maybe I wouldn't have drafted that guy. I would have drafted this guy. And, and constantly cutting their feet out, whether it's intentional or not, but always having that one voice, that nice, consistent, foundational support put underneath that person, and really like positively reinforcing that verbally with continuous communication. Because like that's the kind of thing that, for instance, Steve Bisciotti has done for John. There's a reason why Steve Bisciotti has had 2 head coaches in the history of his ownership, and why he's had 2 general managers in the history of his ownership. Because that first of all, being able to identify those guys. He identified Brian Billick. He identifies John Harbaugh. He knew he had Ozzie Newsome. Ozzie told him about Eric DeCosta, and then they
Right.
continue to just bring him along, right? But those guys get unwavering support from this guy,
Yeah.
unwavering. And how many times have they pivoted in terms of like, yeah, they've always had the people who play like a Raven. But think about philosophically how John Harbaugh has kind of pivoted throughout
Hmm.
his career, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Look at the different coaches that he has had, and the different kinds of just like philosophical left and right turns that he has
Yeah.
taken in order to find what is ideal for them. And it wasn't like Steve Bisciotti was sitting there going, "Oh, damn,
Yeah.
John doesn't know what the hell he's doing." Now, at one point he has Greg Roman. Next thing you know, now he's kind of changed and he's made T. Martin the quarterback coach, and now he has Todd
Yeah.
Monken, and now they want to open it up a little bit. Now they want to make Lamar a passer. Is he real? No, he believed in them,
Yeah.
allowed them to continue to adapt and adjust. And next thing you know, you have sustained success that is just it's like the MB of the NFL. So I
I,
think that's what they have to be. And I know, look, I could go on and on and on about
yeah.
this. Honestly, I kind of feel like I'm having my like I'm being interviewed again by the Jets because this is a lot of the stuff that we talk about and that we have talked about. And yeah, it's not. It sounds simple, but it's hard for a lot of these owners to do
Yeah.
that. It's hard because they've been so damn successful that they wind up feeling like I remember an owner telling me this one time, believe it or not, it's football. How hard can it be? And I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Extremely hard.
it's a lot it's a lot harder than you think it might be. And if everyone could like, put that kind of plan in place and just execute it like you're reading directions or rather reading a recipe out of a cookbook, then everyone would be successful. But there's just so many other different little nuances within all that can like throw out of whack. And
Yeah.
clearly that happens to a lot of people.
It's interesting. You mentioned the Baltimore thing. I think about that all the time, and I've talked about it on the show where one of the amazing things about Baltimore is that the media narrative could be one thing. Could be Lamar can't win the big game. Could be John Harbaugh's in the hot seat. Whatever it is, whatever it happens to be that week. And then you go into Owings Mills, Maryland. There is not a trace of that inside the building. And
Yeah.
bad teams always. You just saw it with Najee Harris. He just said he thought that the media narrative seeped into the facility, which never happens with the Steelers ever, but yet it happened this year. And I don't know what that is. I couldn't even begin to guess. But typically, when you go into a good facility, I'll tell you a place, Dallas.
Yep.
The media narrative dictates everything in that facility, everything. And you're there, and the players are reacting to it, and they're bending their will a little bit towards the media narrative. Like it's crazy to see, and it's palpable. It's absolutely palpable, and you can tell. And it goes back to something I said this last week. I think it was to Foxworth, where I was talking about one thing Pat Riley did with Eric Spoelstra during the Big Three era was he sat Spoelstra down and said, I don't care what the noise is, you're keeping your job.
Right.
And it helped them so much because then it became, they lose 3 straight or whatever. And LeBron's, staring, giving a mean mug at Spoelstra. And all the narrative becomes, Spoelstra on the hot seat. No, they can weather it because Pat Riley said nothing can get you to lose your job. Nothing. Right. And then once you have that, that's organizational stability. Is the media doesn't dictate anything on the inside of your facility.
Yeah, I mean, well, what team really? That's a great segue to like the discussion about the Kansas City Chiefs this year.
Yes.
Right. I mean, here's the team with the best record in the NFL, and if they listen to and make no mistake, they hear what the narrative is. They hear from the outside that it's, I don't know, maybe Patrick's not as good as he once was. Maybe Travis is kind of like distracted. Maybe they've missed on too many offensive linemen. That they're just not developing them right. They don't have enough speed on the perimeter. They don't have enough playmaking ability. Xavier Worthy is a one-trick pony. The defense is kind of losing a step. They shouldn't have let go of L'Jarius Sneed. The secondary isn't quite as good. And they're freaking, they're 16-1.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the reason why they're able to stay just like this, just right down the middle.
Yeah.
Is because Clark Hunt knows Andy's running the ship. You never hear Clark say a word.
No.
A word. Andy doesn't play that game. He doesn't give the media anything. As a matter of fact, he gives them a ton now compared to what he used to. Really. You never hear a peep out of Brett Veach, although he'll make an appearance here and there, on McAfee's show or whatever it is. But it's because it's so aligned, and there's such a belief that, look, the proof is in the pudding as far as what we have done, the resume that we have put together as an organization. And even before that resume was put together in Kansas City, although Andy had a great one when he was in Philadelphia, people believed in what his vision was. He knew that when Brett took over eventually, from John Dorsey,
Yeah.
they were aligned.
Yeah.
They were trying to get certain types of play. And here was the kicker. Here was the thing. So you got owner who kind of stays out of the way, does what he needs to do from an ownership perspective as far as providing the support that's necessary. You have the GM who grew up underneath the head coach during his time in Philadelphia. So those two are philosophically, it's perfect. Then they get the guy. Then they first get Alex.
Yeah.
Then they get Patrick, who is just an extension of that entire axis right there.
Yep.
That tripod. Who now was such he may honestly, Kevin, and I say this, like I don't say this flippantly. He may be the most perfect high round coming into the building, was supposed to be the franchise guy from day one, draft pick of all time.
Yeah.
Because nothing happens in Kansas City that doesn't emanate from the example that Patrick sets.
I completely agree.
Nothing. And I don't say that to try and like get a headline on Twitter or across sports. Nothing happens that doesn't emanate from the example that he sets. And that's why you have every single stinking year, this team is consistently right there. And they're going to be there again.
I completely agree.
They're going to be there again, despite people getting Kansas City Chief fatigue.
Right.
Like, damn, they can't do it again, can they?
They can.
And they can. You're absolutely right. And that's because of basically because of the conversation, what we're talking about here from the very beginning. That's good ownership. That's philosophical alignment. That's blocking out the noise in the truest sense, because that team has distractions galore. Imagine if they were in a bigger market.
Yeah.
Imagine if they were in a bigger market and Taylor Swift was at every game. Imagine if they're in a bigger market and their quarterback was on every commercial known to man.
Yep.
Dealing with the kind of things that he's had to deal with, outside of football, in terms of like some of the attention that his family members get. And he doesn't blink ever.
I know.
It's just he never blinks, and their GM just continues to nail draft pick after draft pick after draft pick. And they're going to be there again. I mean, they are the poster boys for it, man.
I completely agree. It's funny. You mentioned that they hear the narrative. It reminds me of something, and this is my last thing on this, but it reminds me of something I used to fill in like occasionally on the Yankees beat.
Yep.
And Derek Jeter was the master at pretending that nothing was ever wrong. And there was actually a guy who used to do a great impression of Jeter, where literally you could tell him anything. You could say, hey, the guy, I'm making this up, but the guys in the Orioles, clubhouse said you're the most overrated guy in the world. And Jeter would just go, oh, really? I don't really know much about that. So, and it's like, it was just, nothing was ever wrong. Nothing was, because he knew everything was going to be a headline. And that's the thing with the Chiefs. Nothing ever bothers them. They internalize it. They use it for motivation, but it never becomes a headline inside. But
you can best believe that they hear it.
Yeah.
And they're human beings, right? So these guys get affected by stuff, but not so much to the degree where it starts to fracture or splinter the team. They 100%. Still get their business done, because again, you talk about that tip of the spear on the field.
Yeah.
You can't break Patrick Mahomes.
Completely agree. All right, let's get sorry.
So anyway, that's that.
Let's get to some game preview stuff. You mentioned this Ravens team already. On the field, they seem like they're peaking at the right time. The defense is getting better. Lamar and Derrick Henry. I thought so much of the other night. Everybody was like, oh, the Steelers don't want to be there. Maybe, but they also had just a lot less talent. And it's not Patrick Queen making a business decision as much as it is Patrick Queen can't tackle Derrick Henry, because Derrick Henry is running 22 miles per hour through the backfield. Take me through, roster construction-wise, why this Ravens team is what it is right now.
They're bigger, stronger, and faster than their opponents. And they've got a lot of depth. And see, that's where, like on the defensive side of the football, remember I was talking to Zach Orr just a couple of weeks ago about that, is that they are peaking health-wise, especially in their front seven, in particular on the defensive line, where they're, they're 6, 7 deep, easy on the defensive line, and they're big, strong, smart, motivated, multi-dimensional players on that side of the ball, to where now they can roll in there and kind of keep one another fresh. They have tremendous leadership within position groups at all three levels. And then they've got a couple alphas on the defensive side of the football that it just keeps it all in check. And this isn't before we get to the part where most people want to talk about, which is the offense. But guys like Kyle Van Noy, I mean, a guy like him is just, and the reason why I talk about Kyle is the fact that this is a guy who had kind of been jettisoned from other organizations, told that he wasn't good enough, and he's just a guy who just kind of sets everything in line for this organization as far in the defensive side of the football in terms of the way it's supposed to play. And then all the adjustments that they made on the defense in the back end, with the changes they made at safety in particular, has just really just calmed everything down from a communication standpoint. Everyone understands what their roles are. And on top of it, they've got some super, super talented players on that side of the football. So that's just that side of the ball. Look, offensively, what Lamar now has done as far as being able to use all that wonderful athletic talent whenever he needs to use it, what he's done now in terms of combining that with the cerebral part of his game, and how him and Todd have kind of like found that sweet spot right now, is going to catapult him to maybe his third MVP. Number two, the move of T. Martin from wide receiver coach to quarterback coach a year ago was a genius move by John Harbaugh, because now it provides that conduit between Todd Monken and Lamar to kind of really, like, as you see T with him on the sideline in between every series. Like, every player has their comfort zone. Every player has their way of who they like to talk to that really they can kind of absorb information from. They found that. Offensively, on the offensive line, they're huge and they're athletic. Huge. Lamar provides the lateral component as far as the zone read game, attacking the edges. Derek provides the downhill 6'4", 255-pound Mack truck that hits 22 miles per hour component. The thing that could derail them, and you hope it doesn't, you just hope that Zay is able to come back at some point in this playoff run, and that his knee injury, whatever it is, isn't something that's going to be lingering all the way to hopefully when they get to the AFC title game or the Super Bowl. Because he's kind of really the icing on the cake. Because he's the chess piece. And then you got Likely and you got Mark Andrews. And those guys, those guys are just, so they can play you in 11, they can play you in 12. They're so multifaceted and talented. And then there's the whole play like a Raven. Well, there's a standard. There's a freaking standard that these guys play to that has gone back all the way to 1996 when Ozzie Newsome put together his first draft class. And that has just carried this team through for the better part of almost 30 years. And I'm telling you, it's something to behold. They Kansas City, these teams, they're the standard. That's the standard. And you're right. When you talk, it's funny that you brought up the whole business decisions thing when you're talking about Patrick Queen. Because you remember on the one touchdown run, and maybe we're talking about the same one. I don't know if it was the third quarter in that Pittsburgh game, where they had they did the thing that Derek to do, which is to stop his feet behind the line of scrimmage, and then it was like a zone read. Lamar gives it to him, and then he carries out his fake, and you see three Pittsburgh defenders follow Lamar. So everybody kind of got out of their gaps. Then you see Derek just make a beeline vertically. Who did you see? You saw Joey Porter Jr. had a beeline on him. Could have easily chopped him down. Slowed down. Almost like somebody else tackled this dude. Somebody else go ahead and throw their shoulder pads in there.
Needed Joey Porter Sr. for that one.
No kidding. That's what they are. I know you chuckled at the beginning when I gave you the answer, like they're bigger, stronger, and faster. The fact is they are.
Yeah.
And then 100%. they've got the X factor in Lamar, who kind of Myles Garrett told us this when we did their game a couple weeks ago. The only thing that stops Baltimore is Baltimore. Baltimore, for some reason, feels as though they have to do something different once they get to the playoffs. That is what has hurt them in the biggest moments. If they will just be who they are weeks 1 through 17, no one will beat them. His words. They're their own worst enemy. And I think that'll be the case again.
Hmm.
You know, talent wise, 1 through 53, are they better than Buffalo? Yeah. Are they better than 1 through 53 than Kansas City? Yeah, probably.
Hmm.
But the fact is, that isn't what always decides games in the NFL. And we know what it comes down to. And see, the one guy of those three teams and of those three quarterbacks has shown you that no matter what, I'm going to be who I am. That's 15 from Kansas City. That's Patrick Mahomes.
Yep.
So,
Two more for you, and then we'll get you out of here.
yep,
Jayden Daniels,
yep,
just early success. And I flicked at it earlier about the culture and stuff like that, but just to see how calm he is. And Peyton Manning was on this show on Friday, and he said, the thing that impresses him most about Jayden is he looks in the fourth quarter like he does in pregame warmups, totally
yep,
unflappable. What
yep.
is that? Is that a ton of college reps? Is that just a supernatural ability to just stay cool when everybody else is losing their heads? Like what is Jayden Daniels late in games? What is that coming from?
I think some of that's just, God given.
Yeah.
Certain people thrive in those kind of moments, no matter what. And certain people, I don't care how much they feel as though they're prepared or how physically talented they are, the pressure just makes them tighten up and they just can't handle it. We all know people like that. He's just wired different. Then on top of it, his preparation is unique. He leaves no stone unturned. He's uniquely committed to the game. The players there have said that from day one. Like, this guy's the first guy in here, and it wasn't just the first day; it's every day.
Yeah.
And so he raises the game of everyone else. So people start playing above and beyond what people thought, originally their ceilings were. And go back to the people at LSU.
Yep.
And ask them about what it was like when he first went to LSU, when he transferred from ASU. He put in the same kind of work. He's always been that dude. And just on top of it, he's got that, he was born with that arm, born with that kind of speed, born with that kind of mental processing, that kind of internal drive and all. And it's just, you wind up going, well, this is what's supposed to happen. This is how these kind of guys that's how things usually go for these kind of dudes. And the thing about it is, it's the mental part. It's the mental makeup. It's that intrinsic part for him. You could see it if you've ever been up close next to him. He's so damn cool, and so unflappable. You're just kind of like, who was like that? I got that same feeling when I was around C.J. Stroud 2 years ago. Same thing, same coolness, same. When you talk to them, their eyes are like locked in on yours. It's not, yeah, man, yeah, No, it's like this. It's like, you have something I can take, something that can help me. They're locked in, and not all dudes are like that.
Reminds me, obviously he's not as good as he once was, but it reminds me of Russell Wilson, where the famous stories were always that when he was young, you're always at these BS media events or whatever. You go see Terry Bradshaw, he'd go over, hey, Terry, what do I do in this situation? Like, he just locked in all the time. He wasn't just going to sit, stand at the open bar and just hang out. So, I mean, those guys, when they start sort of collecting that data, it only gets better. I'll say that. By the way, you want somebody unflappable, Cam Ward. Just free advice for GMs. Cam Ward, just as cool as Jayden Daniels.
I've gotten to talk to him 3 times. We did a game of his at Washington State 2 years ago, and then we got to do 2 Miami games this year. This dude, he's a stone cold killer, man. No question. When you talk about alphas, when you talk about in your face alphas, quarterbacks, the tip of the spear who want to hold everyone else accountable. Some of the stories of him and what he did with that football team last spring before Miami played in 2024, in the fall of 24, the way in which he challenged people who were already there, the way in which he talked to them, the way in which he said, look, I don't know what you were used to, but it ain't going to be that way now. This is a guy who hadn't even taken a snap yet for the team. Are legendary. Legendary.
Incredible. QB1 to me. I don't know how you're feeling about
that. Yep, I'm with you.
Yeah. Best player, real quick. You saw a bunch of college games this year. You do great. You're doing the playoffs, all that stuff. Best college player you saw this year.
Yeah, it's a tie for me. It's either Cam, because of how impressed I was with him, obviously off the field, and some of the throws that he made. Both
unbelievable. The confidence. And just the coolness that, like, hang in there in the pocket. It was funny because I had an ex-GM tell me, like, teams actually might be scared because he's so confident in the pocket. It just looks almost unnatural, right?
Yeah.
Like,
He
but
knows
like
that.
that's his strength.
He knows that. He knows that he won't be able to get away with some of that
Yeah.
nonchalantness that he shows. But it's he's not doing it to rub people's faces in it.
No.
That's just him. But he knows that some of that's going to have to kind of go by the wayside and be more secure with the ball when he's in the pocket, like when he got it knocked off him late against Georgia Tech, like those kind of things. But it's either him or Ashton Genty for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, Ashton is Emmitt Smith with 4.4, 4.3 speed. He is just, I mean, he's a ball of muscle, but he's fluid, flexible, can catch the ball in the backfield, will pass protect. Super, super, super kid, strong as hell. Yeah, those two. I mean, Abdul Carter's right up there as well. I mean, we saw so many. There are a lot of good players in college football this year, a lot of them. But yeah, I would say those two, Cam and Ashton, are probably the two very best, with Abdul right there.
It's 12:22. I'm just going to think about the Georgia Tech Miami game for the rest of the day and be depressed. Thank you, Louis Riddick. Appreciate you, man.
Yeah, of course.